of the first events that I had that happened, and there was a series of several, but one of the first ones was after separating from my husband and looking for a new home, and I had a newborn baby, and I was looking for a home, and found the home of my dreams, came up with a contract for it, et cetera, et cetera. There were some new investors that were remodeling it, and I even came up with what walls we were going to take down and which ones to add in and how I wanted the whole thing to lay out. They eventually put another $150,000 into the home that I wasn't expecting on paying, so it became out of my price range and I lost the deal. And at this point, I'm meditating an hour a day, probably for about 4 years, every single day. I might have skipped a total of a week for a whole year, but I was pretty committed. And at this time I started imagining what my new home would look like. And I was so saddened by this other home that I wasn't gonna have. And I just started thinking, well, what if I had anything and everything I wanted, what would that look like? Because it wouldn't have been that. And I started thinking exactly what that would look like. And I started thinking it would be how many rooms and how much acreage, and where I live there's a lot of things that are on cliffs, and I wanted flat land so me and my son could play baseball, and I wanted 2 more rooms than the previous house had, and more open floor space and a ton more windows and the sun rising from a certain side of the house. So I just drew what it looked like and the level of stories and wraparound porches, and you know, I'm not really a great drawer, but I just drew everything out and how I wanted to see the land, and I closed my journal and I opened it back up and I said, and I would like a chicken coop with chickens, and I'd also like a garden that has food already growing in it, and I can imagine myself picking a tomato and eating it straight out the garden. And I closed my journal and I said, and I'd like a sign. And I kept going like this, I want a sign. If you're gonna tell me where to go, then give me a sign. And for some reason I kept doing this. And I was still doing my daily meditation over and over, and I would imagine what a new, safe home would look like for my son and I, and he's, you know, just a newborn at the time. About 4 days later, I'm driving through the neighborhood that I wanted to have that home in, and there's only 30 houses in this neighborhood. And I'm driving through the neighborhood, there's a sign on the side of the road that's exactly this size, and it has a fuchsia arrow that says turn here, and I didn't even think, I just turned there, and it was a for sale sign for a house by owner. It was neon yellow. Yellow's my favorite color. The house was neon yellow, not the sign. And I follow this sign, and there was another one with a fuchsia sign, and I pull up in the driveway, and turns out I walk up to the door, and the guy that's there is actually a girl that I met in the park 6 months prior, who was new to town from Germany, and I'm like a leader of this particular group that welcomes in new people inside of our town, and I had gifted her a gift when I didn't know her. I wasn't able to show up to the party that we were having for this girl. What happens to be her house, and it's for sale. And it's 3 stories like I wanted, with the 4 rooms and the huge windows and wraparound porches. The acreage, the exact acreage, I kept saying 3 acres, 3 acres, 3 acres, with half flat land, lots of woods. And I walk around the edge of the house, and there's a chicken coop that looks like a mother-in-law suite. It doesn't look like a little chicken coop, like it looks like another house. You would think someone lives in it. It's the chickens. And then behind the chicken coop, or right beside it, is the garden growing with fresh tomatoes. And I walked over there with the owner that I yet to know that I was gonna be buying the house, and he pulled off a tomato and handed it to me and said, take a bite of this. And I didn't even realize it was my house until I bit into that tomato, and I thought, this is everything I had imagined. Everything. Like, to the T. And there were a few more things I probably left out, but everything to the T as when I bit into that tomato. I'm in the house now, and it's great, and I love it, and I ended up purchasing it for the exact amount of dollars that I had written in my journal that I was able to invest into a home. The exact amount, like, to the exact amount. The exact amount. I just made that offer, and he said okay, and it was less than what he was asking.